Ladies and gentlemen.
We hunt. We fight. We kill.
This film is based on true events from 1929, a time when the global economy had collapsed following World War I. Amid this turmoil, Dr. Friedrich Ritter and Dor Strauch leave Germany and travel to the remote island of Floreana, located on the other side of the world. The outside world only learns about Ritter's solitary life through letters that occasionally get picked up by passing ships. Ritter's mission is to write a new philosophical treatise, one that he believes could save humanity from itself. He holds the belief that the true meaning of life lies in enduring suffering. The story then jumps ahead several years. We're introduced to another family, Margaret Whitmer, her husband Heinz, and their son Harry. Heinz is deeply inspired by Ritter's writings. The family sells all their possessions and arrives on the island in search of a new life. It's now the winter of 1932, meaning Ritter and Dor have already been living on Floreana for 3 years. Soon after, the Whitmer family meets Ritter and Dor and introduces themselves. But the couple is visibly unsettled by the arrival of these new guests. Heinz excitedly tells Ritter that his letters have been published in newspapers, making him a sensation back in Germany. Ritter then takes Heinz to his garden and tries to explain how difficult life on the island truly is. He attempts to intimidate the newcomers, warning them about wild boars, stray dogs, and feral cattle. He also mentions that the island has no natural water source, only 2 small springs that collect rainwater. Ritter helps load the Whitmers' belongings onto a pet donkey, which Dor is very fond of. He then leads them to a cave nestled in the hills and tells them they can stay there, where they'll be protected from the rain. However, he emphasizes that the water shortage is a serious issue. Before leaving, Ritter warns them to return the donkey by nightfall, or Dor will make sure they regret it. That evening, Dor tells Ritter she doesn't like the new arrivals at all. She finds them useless and believes they'll need a lot of help. But Ritter reassures her, saying he placed them in a cave where nothing can grow. He's confident they won't last long and will leave before the rainy season begins. Hearing this, Dor visibly relaxes. In the days that follow, the Whitmer family works tirelessly to make their new shelter livable. They face extremely harsh conditions, especially at night when Margaret is frightened by the constant sounds of insects and wild animals. Eventually, after much effort, they manage to build a pipeline to collect fresh rainwater. One night, Margaret tells Heinz that she hasn't had her period in 3 months, she's pregnant. Heinz is overjoyed. The next day, both families go about their daily routines. Suddenly, a gunshot echoes in the distance. Ritter grabs his binoculars and sees a boat approaching the shore, which clearly irritates him. Soon, the boat docks and a woman named Alois disembarks, supported by her 2 lovers, Rudy and Robert. Alois is mesmerized by the island's beauty and talks about building a luxury resort there. The trio enthusiastically heads toward the water and begins frolicking together, while their servant Manuel watches with a confused expression. Later, Dor is working in the garden when Alois arrives with her companions. Alois introduces herself as a baroness and says they've been searching for the famous doctor for quite some time. At that moment, Ritter steps out from inside. Alois excitedly tells him that she's always dreamed of meeting the man who conquered nature and built his own kingdom. She claims that everyone she's met, from presidents to prime ministers and philosophers, talks about the brilliant man who pulled out his own teeth to avoid cavities. Ritter asks where they're staying, and Alois replies that they've set up camp on the beach. Ritter warns them that there's no water there and says he knows a better location. We then see Alois and her lovers bathing in a pond and laughing together. But the Whitmer family arrives and becomes furious. They're polluting the only source of drinkable water. Alois calmly apologizes, saying she didn't know. She introduces herself as their new neighbor and explains that she's planning to build a resort on the island. She says Rudy is her engineer and Robert is her bodyguard. She then hands Heinz a few letters, saying some are for the Whitmers and some for Ritter. She politely asks Heinz to deliver them. Later, Heinz gives the letters to Ritter, but they discover the envelopes have already been opened. Ritter is furious. Ritter begins to wonder why Alois didn't hand over the letters when she first met him. Dor suspects this was done deliberately, to make it seem like Heinz had opened the letters himself and provoke conflict between the 2 families. Angered by this, Heinz goes to confront Alois and asks why she's trying to stir hostility between neighbors by tampering with their mail. Alois calmly replies that the doctor did the same thing. He showed Heinz the Whitmers' water source instead of his own, hoping it would spark tension between them. She then shows Heinz her grand resort plans, claiming it will be an exclusive destination for millionaires. But Heinz doubts whether such a lavish project is even feasible in such a harsh environment. His skepticism clearly offends Alois. The scene shifts to the spring where the Whitmer family has built half of their home. Everything seems to be going well, and Margaret excitedly shows her husband their first vegetable harvest. But their peace is abruptly shattered when Alois and her lovers set up camp nearby, having found the beach too unbearably hot. The Whitmers are deeply disturbed by this intrusion. The Baroness assures them she'll only stay until her resort is built and Rudy finds a new water source. Days pass, and Rudy grows increasingly frustrated. Despite repeated attempts, he fails to dig a well in a suitable location. He returns to camp in a rage, only to find Robert and Alois loudly engaged in intimacy, which further irritates him. Later, Alois steps outside and asks Rudy to heat up a can of corn. Rudy snaps, shouting that they have no food at all, and it's all her fault for bringing them here without proper preparation. Hurt by his words, Alois runs off into the jungle, crying. The next day, Margaret is home alone while her husband and son are out hunting. Robert and Manuel watch her and the house from a distance. Suddenly, Margaret experiences sharp abdominal pain, which confuses her since the baby isn't due for several more weeks. As the pain intensifies, she panics and calls out for Heinz, but he's nowhere nearby. Desperate, she sets out to find help. Meanwhile, Robert and Manuel sneak into the house and begin searching for food. Margaret reaches the Baroness's camp and frantically calls out for Alois, Rudy, and even Manuel. We see that Alois and Rudy are inside the camp, deliberately ignoring her cries. Back at the house, the intruders find canned food and begin stealing as much as they can. But they're forced to hide when Margaret returns, groaning in pain. With no other option, she lays newspapers on the ground and prepares to deliver the baby herself. The thieves watch silently from their hiding spot. Just then, she hears a cow mooing outside and steps out to investigate, giving the intruders a chance to escape. Her condition worsens when a pack of wild dogs surrounds the house and begins barking aggressively. Already in labor, the poor woman grabs a broom and tries to fend them off, but there are too many. Meanwhile, Alois is furious that the men brought back so little food, barely enough to last a few weeks. Manuel, panicked, tells her that Margaret is giving birth alone and needs help. Rudy agrees, but the cruel Alois firmly stops them, saying they're only here to help her, not anyone else. At that moment, Margaret's water breaks and she remains surrounded by the vicious dogs. Summoning all her strength, she screams at them and finally manages to deliver her baby. But the dogs immediately try to attack the newborn and Margaret is unable to protect it. Just in time, Heinz and Harry arrive and fire shots into the air, scaring the dogs away. Fortunately, the baby appears healthy, but Margaret's condition deteriorates rapidly. A frantic Heinz rushes to Dr. Ritter, begging him to save his wife's life. At first, Ritter refuses outright, but when Dor also pleads with him, he reluctantly agrees to help the Whitmer family. Upon examining Margaret, Ritter discovers that the placenta is dangerously lodged in her uterus. He urgently needs hot water and a spoon to resolve the issue. Meanwhile, Manuel, who has been secretly spying, runs to Alois and tells her that the doctor is helping Margaret. The Baroness flies into a rage, fearing the neighbors might become friends. Her deranged comments push Manuel over the edge and he finally snaps. Enraged, Alois immediately fires him. On the other side, Ritter skillfully removes the trapped placenta and successfully saves Margaret's life. The scene then shifts to summer when the entire island has dried out. Ritter continues writing but struggles to find new ideas. His writing begins to feel like mere imitation of other philosophers. Meanwhile, Rudy approaches the Whitmer family, pleading for food he hasn't eaten in days. The couple, showing kindness, invites him to share a meal with them. During dinner, Rudy makes a shocking revelation. Alois isn't a real baroness. She's fabricated her entire persona, borrowing her accent, title, and even stories from films. He explains that her parents disowned her because of her erratic behavior, and afterward she worked as a cabaret dancer in Paris. That's where she met Rudy and Robert. Soon, a ship arrives at the island carrying an expedition team led by a man named Alan Hancock. Alois immediately begins tidying up the camp, believing Alan might be her ticket off the island. It's revealed that Alan has come to meet Ritter and has brought essential supplies and food for everyone. Later, Alois dresses in an elegant outfit and approaches Alan, trying to charm him effortlessly. She soon learns that Alan isn't just an explorer. He's also a wealthy and famous Hollywood film director. That evening, Alan hosts a small party where he congratulates Ritter for his bravery, offers best wishes to the Whitmers for Floreana's first newborn, and compliments Alois on her beauty. After dinner, the expedition prepares to leave the next day. Desperate, Alois tries to seduce Alan, but he politely rejects her. Alan laughs loudly and makes it clear he's not interested. He bids her farewell, leaving Alois stunned that someone could actually reject her. The next day, the ship departs without her, leaving Alois deeply disappointed and anxious. That afternoon, Ritter discovers that Alois has stolen all the supplies Alan left behind. Furious, he goes to the Whitmers and declares that it's time to choose sides. Ritter and Heinz grab rifles and head to Alois's camp, demanding she return the stolen food. Alois flatly refuses and even mocks Heinz, asking how he could possibly think Ritter would share food with her. At that moment, Robert pulls out a gun and tries to shoot them, but Margaret intervenes and prevents bloodshed. At home, Ritter is consumed by rage and fires bullets into his typewriter. He then announces he's going hunting and takes the last remaining can of food with him. Dor protests, saying it was meant for the chickens, but Ritter argues they can eat scraps and storms off. Later that day, Rudy is eating with the Whitmers when Alois comes out and asks to speak with him privately. Reluctantly, Rudy joins her. Alois hands him food and clothes, saying he's free to leave. She never intended to hold him back. Moved by her words, Rudy kisses her and asks if there's anything she wants him to do before he goes. That night, the Whitmer family is awakened by strange noises coming from their garden. Heinz grabs his rifle and is shocked to discover their water supply has been stolen. He fires a shot toward the sound, but when he looks closely, his eyes widen in horror. It's Dor's beloved donkey. The next morning, Dor notices her chickens are sick. She begins to panic when she realizes her donkey is missing too. She goes to the Whitmers and asks if they've seen it, but they all pretend not to know. The poor woman collapses to her knees in despair. Heinz quickly helps her and takes her home. Heinz then speaks privately with Ritter and tells him everything. Soon after, they spot Robert spying from the bushes before running off. They realize this was all Alois's scheme. Enraged, they set out to confront her. On the way, they run into Rudy, who immediately apologizes and admits Alois forced him to steal the donkey. He confesses he just wants to go home. Hearing this, Ritter and Heinz forgive him. When Heinz returns home, he sends his wife and son into the forest to gather grass to reinforce the roof before the rains come. Meanwhile, Ritter, Rudy, and Heinz go to confront Alois and demand she come out of her tent. Suddenly, Robert bursts out in anger and attacks them. He proves to be incredibly strong, overpowering all three men one by one. He nearly kills Rudy, but Heinz jumps in at the last moment and saves him, stabbing Robert repeatedly until he collapses and dies. Moments later, Alois emerges from the camp, now playing the victim. She claims Robert was controlling and abusive and she had been desperately trying to escape him. She then tries to tempt the three men, saying they can now share her resort equally because they've proven their worth. But no one believes Alois's words. Then it happens. Ritter, cold and composed, shoots her in the head. Margaret hears the gunshots. The three men then carry both bodies and throw them into the water. They agree not to tell their wives anything. The next day, Rudy visits both families and claims that Alois and Robert left on a ship, leaving behind a letter. But the women immediately grow suspicious. Alois would never abandon her valuable belongings. Even Ritter pretends to be skeptical, which makes Heinz feel increasingly anxious and afraid. Rudy then sells some of Alois's valuables to Ritter, hoping to gather enough money to leave the island for good. Later at home, Margaret confronts her husband. She says she knows Alois and Robert are dead. She heard the gunshots. She checked his rifle the night before and found all the bullets intact, meaning Ritter fired the shot. Margaret is convinced that Ritter will write to the governor and accuse Heinz of the murder. That way, he'll have Heinz arrested and reclaim control over the island. Hearing this, Heinz is filled with regret and tells his wife to leave him. But Margaret, full of resolve, says she'll never let anyone destroy their family. Meanwhile, Dor has grown tired of Ritter and announces she's decided to leave him. She reminds him that they came to the island for a greater purpose, but now he spends all his time scheming against the neighbors. Ritter insists they ruined his life, but Dor retorts that he ruined it himself and even calls him a traitor. Later, Dor is in the jungle when she runs into Margaret. Margaret has heard that Dor's chickens are sick and offers her some healthy hens and eggs, but Dor refuses. Margaret then warns her that Ritter is dangerous and may have killed Alois. Dor refuses to believe it, saying the doctor dedicated his life to nonviolence. Before leaving, Margaret advises her never to cook sick chickens. They're full of toxic substances. Meanwhile, Rudy spots a small boat near the shore. He swims out to it and begs the captain to take him to Isabella Island. The captain says he doesn't have enough fuel to get there. But when Rudy offers him 200 sucres, the captain agrees and lets him aboard. Back on the island, Ritter finally has a breakthrough in his writing and develops a new philosophy. He shares it with Dor enthusiastically. Dor suggests they celebrate the moment with chicken. Later, she deliberately serves him one of the sick chickens and Ritter eats it without suspicion. Hours later, Dor goes to the Whitmer family and says Ritter is very ill and needs help. They rush to her home where Heinz asks what happened. Before Dor can answer, Margaret speaks up, saying it's food poisoning, a simple mistake. As Ritter nears death, Dor mocks him, saying he's now immortal. With his final breath, Ritter curses her and dies. The scene shifts to autumn. The governor arrives on the island to investigate what happened. It's revealed that Ritter had indeed sent him a letter accusing Heinz of murdering the Baroness. Heinz insists he's innocent. When the governor questions Margaret, she fiercely defends her husband. But the governor reveals that Dor also confirmed Heinz was the killer. Margaret counters, arguing that Dor actually poisoned Ritter. She says it's impossible that a man who survived 4 years on the island could suddenly die from eating spoiled chicken like a novice. She also reveals that she gave Dor healthy chickens the day before, but Dor deliberately didn't use them. When the case remains unresolved, the governor decides to leave the island, and Dor agrees to go with him. The Whitmer family chooses to stay, declaring the island their true home. Before the film ends, it's revealed that the bodies of Alois and Robert were never found. Dor returned to Germany, where she died in 1943 from multiple sclerosis. Before her death, she published her account of the events on Floreana. In response, Margaret wrote her own book, which contradicted Dor's version entirely. Margaret lived on the island until the year 2000 and died at the age of 96. Rudy never made it to Isabella. He and the captain were found 150 nautical miles off course. Adrift at sea, their boat had run out of fuel and drifted away. Today, her descendants still run a small tourist hotel on Floreana Island. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.